Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Lawman, Reeves, Season 1, Episode 7. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I believe this to be the penultimate episode. Obviously, there's one more episode. I'm obviously getting to this super late, and Episode 8 already came out, but I don't know whether that's the season finale, series finale, but that's going to be a conversation I'll talk about more. Maybe at the end, but also when we get to the end of the season. But either way, so we're picking up with this in media res opening where Bass is getting arrested. My immediate thought was, he tracked down and ended up killing Pierce. But it turns out, it's unclear at that time, and then we rewind 6 weeks, which is kind of wild. It's a very short episode. It might be the shortest episode of the season, and it takes, I don't know, it's like some shows on Paramount Plus do that, weirdly enough. I don't know. I feel like this network does it more than any other, where maybe it's anything related to Taylor Sheridan. I know, like, he's not the showrunner, but he's like an executive producer. I don't even think he's writing on the show. I think he's just an executive producer. But like a lot of his shows, just from a few I've seen, like Mayor of Kingstown and Tulsa King, like, they have like weird like lengths sometimes. You're like, this isn't even 40 minutes, like that. It feels so weird, but I guess it's like that's the benefit of streaming. You're not adherent to like reach a certain length. It's like the episode is what the episode length is. We're not going to get too caught up in that. Maybe it just comes down to the editing way of like, okay, so let's cut this a little short here because for television purpose wise, this would be a good cutoff point. So maybe some of what would have been episode 7 bleeds over into episode 8. Maybe that's a justification. Maybe that, like I said, maybe it's all in the editing too. Just like what makes the perfect like end point, or maybe just the episode which is naturally structured of, hey, the episode ends up what it is because we're not on television. We don't have to worry about ad breaks, so we don't have to reach a certain length. Maybe that's the justification. Once again, that's a whole tangent. That's kind of more of a behind the scenes type of question, I'm sure. But either way, Bass is having dinner not only with Jenny, but also Judge Parker and his wife, and Bass is just like playing the Pierce stuff over and over and over in his head, and he's drowning in regret. And Judge Parker's like, maybe we should have you take a break for a while. But he's like, no, I'm good. And he's like, so there you are. And that makes you finally start listening to us. But it's also because it's a lot of what Pierce said to him last episode, which once again, I don't know if some of those conversations were cut around, like the element where he's like hearing Pierce, like how much of that is just his own consciousness. But it seems like Pierce did say that. It's just we didn't get the entire bulk of that conversation between him and Pierce. They cut away from it just so we could have it at the end point, isolated, and have him like it reverberating throughout his head, him drowning in this, notion of, I'm a killer just like him, and he's trying so hard to prove that he's not. It's like, no, I'm not like him. I might have done this and that, but I'm not a monster like Pierce. But it's like, as the episode goes on, it's like, but am I? So for him, it becomes a situation of he'd rather be away from home, because that line of, you've already kind of kept your family at a distance, but I think for him it's like, I'm gonna go back out there, even though you wanted fought so hard to get back home. It's hard to be home because it's just, you've got that rattling in your head. You don't feel like the same Bass that you were. I mean, Jenny's telling you as much, that you're not the same husband that she married, that every time you go out, a little bit less of you is coming back. You're losing that light in your eyes, and that darkness out there is swallowing you and enveloping your soul little by little, chipping away at it until there's not going to be anything left of you until you're hollow. You're nothing but a husk. And I think just for him, I don't want to surround my family in my darkness, my stuff. So he not only does he not talk about it, he deals with it himself. So him and Billy go out to handle some warrants, and they were supposed to do some light work. In this one in particular, they went to pick up Moody, which they were expecting a guy, but it's a woman. And she hands Bass the candlestick because she's like, you're going to want this. This is what I killed him with. And it's like, and she even said it very, very poetically. I love the way people phrase stuff sometimes when stuff is written in a very like poetic way of like, she's like, I basically came into this world quiet, no huff, no puff. No, like, yelling or anything. So that's how I'm going to exit this world too. So she's like, I'm not going to put up a fight. And because they ended up bringing a cook along with them. That way they're not just like scrambling to get food ready for any prisoners. Because she's the only prisoner. To be fair, they're doing light work. So they're not, I guess she was the only prisoner maybe. Who knows who else they had to deal with, before the fallout of the episode. But for her, she says this line of, I I don't deserve anything other than being hung. I know it. She's like, I did what I did and I deserve it, but I also don't regret doing what I did. And I think that speaks volumes at a time where you have Bass regretting so many deaths and decisions he made, and he's drowning in it. And here's someone who claims to be free of it, but I mean, granted, no one. It's like you can. It's that line from the show Sweet Home. It's also in the webtoon. It's like the difference between not being afraid of death and wanting to die. There is a major difference between that. So it's like, right, you might be prepared for death, doesn't mean you want to die. So I was about to say that look on her face didn't kind of match what she was saying, but you know. But the moment Bass wakes up, he finds out she's gone because the cook ended up releasing her. Because on their way, while he was drowning in his own thoughts, the cook says, "Because you're a monster." And Bass is like, "What'd you say?" And the guy was like, "Nothing." I was like, "Bass, you are tripping, homie." But now I'm like, did the guy actually say that, or was that just Bass imagining stuff? Like maybe he did say that, and he's like, "Oh, you didn't hear what I said, so I'm not gonna repeat it." So maybe he said it under his breath and he didn't expect Bass to hear him, because his actions later on make it seem like, no, he did actually say what he said. Because at the time you're like, I don't know if that's like Bass kind of like weaving in and out of his own head and he's hearing shit that's not actually there. But because of how the cook handles stuff later on, he let her go. Because for him, he sees that Bass, it's like, here you are taking an old woman to a white man's noose. Like, the fact of the matter is, you got so much blood on your hands. Like, how does it feel? Like, here you are, like, getting all this money for these people. Like, it must feel good calling out Jenny, calling out, like, calling his children coons and stuff like that. It's like, Jesus. It's like, because here you are serving the white man after everything they've done. After, like, we haven't forgotten. Once again, it hasn't been that long since we were in chains. And the first thing you do out of chains is go work for the white man to help track down other people like us. It's like, you probably don't feel too bad about the white people he's like handing over to get hung, but it's like, these are our people who have different reasons for doing what they're doing. Like, we're not the same as these white folk who have such privilege. They have the privilege and opportunity to kill without, you know, I mean, they still have to suffer the ramifications, but it's like, they're not the ones that had to be in chains for generations like we were. So he just looks at Bass as a disappointment. It's like, oh no, go ahead and shoot me. You know, you don't really have any real provocation, but here, go ahead, take my boots, take my shoes, and make some money. You know, hope that blood money's good for you. And he kind of reached for something, and Bass shot him. Like, he had a gun, but he didn't actually pull it. I mean, who knows what he was actually going to pull? Maybe it seemed like he had a gun in his waist, but maybe he didn't. But, you know, Billy goes over, is like, what'd you do, Bass? All right, let's get your story straight. And Bass doesn't really say anything. They just pack up the body and go. And next thing we know, Bass at home, he doesn't say anything to Jenny, who had her own adventures this episode. We'll shift over to Jenny because all of it blends together, just like both of them dealing with stuff and not telling the other about it. I can only assume, because if Jenny had said what had happened, there's no way Bass would have left. But Esme shows up because she left Edwin. I was wondering if that seemed like that was kind of a thing, but I think after hearing about, like, oh, you're married, like, maybe Esme didn't know that. Maybe she thought, because she was saying, like, the conversation last episode wasn't just an eye-opening situation for Jenny about recognizing Edwin. It was Esme as well. She recognized some, like, ugly aspects about him. It was like, right, your intentions are good. She's like, I knew his dream was pure. Sadly, his heart couldn't follow. So it sounds like it was kind of an affair situation. And maybe she was under the impression, like, hey, like, he's not with his family because it's like, yes, he has children, but the fact of the matter is, like, him and his wife aren't together. Maybe that was kind of an understood thing, supposedly. But now it's like, when he made that point last episode, like, oh yeah, my children understand. And for her, it's like, she had questioned him about it, and he was like, does it really matter? And for her, that was enough of a response of like, oh, I see we're on bullshit time right now, so I'm not going to be about that. So she had to leave him on, because she believed in him, in his messaging and everything, but I think she also loved him. But it's also like, right, you're not, you have a pure dream, but that kind of threw me for a loop, because like, I saw his perspective in a lot of ways last episode, but I didn't agree with a lot of what he said and how he went about it. His approach wasn't that great, especially when Jenny called him out, being like, oh, I know what you're trying to use. You're trying to use my husband as a poster child for your pamphlets, and that's why you want to meet my husband so badly. It wasn't just kind of an exchange of ideas, like you just wanted to purely use him. So kind of putting Edwin in a negative light, but this kind of puts him in even more of a negative light. Because I looked at him and like, I understand where he's coming from, what he wants to build. Seems like he has the best. I think it's the best of intentions, but the person behind the best of intentions, it doesn't have the purest heart. You're like any human, you have your faults to you, so it just kind of, when you present yourself a certain way, like you're this great person, and you kind of see a little bit of that ugliness come out of you. It's like, we're all capable of ugliness, but it's when you try to hide it that makes it worse, because no person is perfect. We all have good in us, just like we all have bad in us. We're all capable of good. We're all capable of bad. It all comes down to that saying of like, which wolf are you feeding type of situation, so, which very, goes hand in hand a little bit with what's going on with Vastus since last episode. But either way, Esme and Ginny kind of have this back and forth about Bass, about like, right, even when he's here, he's not really there. The children really don't really get to spend time with their father because he's just kind of a shadow even when he's home. And Esme's coming from the perspective of like, basically that man got baptized in your name, and the fact is that you have a good man, that should be something. But it's like, but I think I see both sides to it in that regards. I see for Esme being like, he's a good guy, he does love you, he does care about you. But for Ginny, it's like, but his need for justice outshines his love for me and his own children. Like, the fact is, we will always come second to justice, which kind of ties into the ending. It kind of just proved her point more. And maybe that's also why she felt reluctant to kind of tell him what happened. Because like I said, if she had told him what had happened, there's no way he would have actually left. Because that family, they waited until they knew for sure Bass wasn't in town anymore. I mean, he wasn't here previously, but they knew, like, right, he's been gone long enough that maybe he could pop in at any point in time. So, like, I guess they figured like they'd scare them or they'd do something, but it's like, if you do something, Bass is going to go on a hell spree at that point. But little girl shows up and is like, oh, is Sally here? Wanted to make sure Sally was home. Wanted to make sure that Bass was gone. So you have Ginny confronting Sally about it, and it's like, you did it to a white girl. It's like, yeah, but I don't did what Dad would do, which even Esme is like, yeah, that does sound like something he would do. But it's like, once again, Sally didn't. I think it is that sad thing of like, it's good to have that strong beliefs and you're handling the situation like your father would have. Maybe the situation wouldn't have who knows, because of that comment, maybe the situation would have played out exactly the same. To be fair, at the time they started shit with him, they didn't know that that's Bass's daughter, so there's that. But Bass was there, he probably would have been able to de-escalate the situation more. So I mean, we're living in ifs and whats. We're living in a time of, I'm trying to talk about something about if something happened. We're not, possibilities are already past, because what happened, and we're dealing with the aftermath, the fallout of it. So they even like had a straw man or whatever burning in front of their front lawn. It's like, yeah, it's not a cross, but the sentiment, you get it regardless. So it's like, cool. Because they were already trying to scare Sally. Was it last episode? They were like I think the son was out there in the woods just staring at them. It's like, and she's like, yeah, you're not going to scare me. So there's that, plus this. So it's like things are escalating more and more. But like I said, she doesn't say anything to Bass when he comes back home before he goes off to get arrested. Didn't even say goodbye to his family because he doesn't want to say goodbyes. He even told Pistol, like, hey, you've been good to me, now be good for the rest of my family. And him and Judge Parker have this really interesting, it's a really great scene where Judge Parker talked about, his family's desperate situation of, yeah, it was a big drought. His mom and dad would fight, and he'd hear them using big words that he didn't understand at the time because he was just a boy. And because they were frustrated because it's like, what do we do? It's a drought, and look at our son. He's getting thinner and thinner because there's not enough, probably because there's no water. That means nothing's getting, farmed or produced. So, you're screwed on both food and, water. So, but ultimately, he went by a river and ended up finding what he thought was nuggets of gold, and he brought it back so excited, thinking that he'd be able to fix everything. Because it's like, wanting to fix everything, his way of handling it back then was try to go on treasure hunts. That is, if I can collect enough money, if I could do enough on my treasure hunts, find enough gold, then I can resolve whatever issues are happening. But it turns out it wasn't gold he found, it was pyrite, fool's gold. And for him, it's like that lesson stuck out with me. So going forward in life, I want to ask you, Bass Reeves, what are you, gold or pyrite, And then Bass turned things around on him, like, right, you talk about your upbringing and yeah, it's up, but let me tell you about mine. Mine involves Like I never really knew my dad because he was sold off when I was little. And around Christmas time, they would bring him around just for a meal or a little bit of a sit down, and then he had to be going just like that. The fact is, the effed up thing is the closest thing he kind of had to a father was William Reeves, George's dad, which Esme did bring that up, which I'll circle back to that in a second. But it ends up being this conversation about, yeah, this man taught me how to ride. He taught me how to shoot. He was, by all intents and purposes, he was not a cruel man. He was a good man to me. And everyone was telling me, oh, how lucky I am to be in his good graces. But then he gave me to a son who his son was cruel. And there was only so much of that I could take of his cruelty before we know what Bass did. He beat the ever-living shit out of him and had this whole conversation of, I know what's waiting for me. I will pay the price for my crimes, but at the end of the day, Judge Parker, are you ready to meet me there? Because it is that conversation again where it's like you have Pierce saying like, oh, if you're the heaven's full of killers, and obviously Bass is kind of saying it's full of hell. That's where hell's waiting for them. So not only for Bass for all that he's done, but also Parker for all the souls he's sent away. Like, he tries to be fair, and it's just like, that's such a hard thing to say. Of like, I'd like to believe him in being, when it comes to fair, because like, it ain't just black people that hang, it's white folk too. So it's like, I don't know. I believe there is sincerity with Judge Parker, but I can also see and understand Bass's perspective on things, because it's easy to have your perspective. For him, it's like to be able to have things so binary of, oh, what is good, what is evil, that is so black and white, when it is not. Like, life is filled with so many shades of gray, and Bass kind of represents that shade of gray. It's like, it's easy to, considering your circumstances, considering the color of your skin, you could always clearly know who's right and wrong to some extent. But it's such a clear thing to you, where it's not so clear for anyone else on this side of the situation. And that in itself is what's gutting him about everything that he's done, every decision he's made, all that's ever happened. I mean, hell, the person who killed Curtis gets to walk around with a badge, and there's nothing Bass could do about it. It's like, I can't arrest you because of jurisdiction and stuff like that. And us both being in a position we are, because like, yeah, the moment you cross that river, you'd never be able to arrest me. But it doesn't. But even Pierce recognizes, I can see the anger in your eyes. You want to kill me. Ultimately, Judge Parker, he says, like, the jury and everything decided he's not guilty, so he gets let go. And maybe this could be a next step to everything being okay, but Bass still isn't okay. He's drowning in that he can't let it go. He's been thinking about Curtis more and more, and about Pierce, and so he ends up telling Jenny, before I came back to you, there was a boy I love like a son named Curtis. I'm going to find the man who killed him. And he walks away and just sees that look on Jenny's face as she cries, because I think there's twofold. The fact is, you had no idea, because Bass doesn't talk about that time, those 3 years that he was away from, 3 years and some change that he was away from you, in episode 1. But then also, it is that, I don't know if self-fulfilling prophecy would be the appropriate term to use, but it's still that thing of, yeah, it's more so about justice than his own family. It's like, yeah, here's someone you love like a son. I understand that. But what about your actual family and everything we're going through? We still come second in some regards to that justice of yours. Because I was about to say, because I know, once again, because of the trailer, this is the whole situation I was talking about. So it's going to come up in the season finale then. But I knew that there's a situation that involves Bass not being there and his family having to deal with it themselves. That scene, I kept referencing it without going into details about it, but at this point I can. It was about that scene in the trailer, and I knew, because of everything that went down with Arthur and Sally, I knew that was going to be the cause for that effect type of situation. Oh, speaking of Sally, I guess she wrote down those lyrics for her mom, because Jenny and Esme were fixing up the piano, and I guess that was her like writing the lyrics for her mom for this song. Like, I guess it was just, I don't know if that's supposed to imply like, right, Sally found that thing that she would never, like, her mom was like, right, the the piano belonged to Mrs. Reeves, but at the end of the day, the music was mine, and maybe that's what Sally found too, and maybe like she wrote the lyrics to make it so this music can never be taken from me. These are my words, my music that can never be taken from me. Maybe that's what that's supposed to represent, because it looked like it was her writing lyrics, but I wasn't quite sure. I'm not very good at reading cursive, and she has very distinct cursive writing, and I'm like, I can make out some of it. I don't know, because it almost looked like it was like lyrics to the song, Wade in the Water. Like, it looked like it was lyrics to that, because I saw one line that looked like it said Wade in the Water, but I could be complete and full of shit on that. So the thing I wanted to go back to was about Esme that I thought was interesting. I had brought it up a little earlier, but didn't finish talking about it. But Esme, when she was sitting at the dinner table, because of what Jenny had said about, like, right, so she wanted to kind of boost. It's like, right, your dad's not around a lot, but let me tell you about your dad. Oh, like even though William Reeves taught him how to shoot, the fact of the matter is your daddy was always good at pulling the trigger, and he would always go off with these, like, go off with William to these contests or whatever, and he'd always come back the winner. All the prize money would go to, I think, specifically, well, William would keep it, or maybe George would. Either way, yeah, he got to keep it, whereas Bass would get the, like, food and stuff, and Pearlie would, like, cook it up for all of them, and our bellies would be stuffed. It's like kind of trying to give the kids an idea of who their father is, and, like, kind of helping out Ginny, where she feels like the kids don't even know their dad. He's kind of like a ghost to them. Like, he's missed so much time with them, and even when he's there, he's still a shell of his former self. So Esme was trying to help that regard, being like, no, this is your daddy. This is who he is. So kind of giving them a little insight about him. I thought that was kind of her way of kind of helping in that regard. So, but yeah, at the end of the episode, we have Bass, Cheryl, and Billy riding off. I'm assuming they know what this is about, and I think they're okay with, personal vendetta type of situation, or maybe they have no idea what Baz has in mind. I'd assume they do, because he brought Shirley along, because I don't think Shirley's going to be reinstated, because he was still working behind the desk last time we saw, but that was a couple episodes ago. So we'll ultimately have to wait to see where all this takes us. Obviously, like I said, the next episode is already out, because I'm getting to this so late. But I'm excited to see where the season, or maybe even series finale. I'd assume series finale, because this was a miniseries, but miniseries do sometimes turn into full-length series. So we'll see how everything plays out. But I'd assume, especially considering this is only based off of the two Bass Reeves books, that this at least will be done. But I guess there's always the potential to adapt the third one into a new season. I don't know, but like I said, I'll have more thoughts on that when we get to the finale, whatever it may be, series or season wise. But either way, till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.